Hi guys, and welcome to the Stephen King Sematary Club. We are on book 2, Tales of Haven. So this has an entire section based on townspeople, and it's reminiscent of Salem's Lot. I don't care about these people as much, and it also reminds me of Needful Things, which is not one of my favorite Castle Rock books. So we find out that Derry is 20 miles away, up north, and there's a big history of how the town came to be and why it had all its name changes, which I didn't find all that interesting. The one thing that I did find very dark and twisted is that a guy came through town. He was a preacher. His name was Colson, and he just fucked his way through the town and knocked up a whole bunch of women. And one of the cucked husbands killed his wife's baby with a straight razor when he found out that the baby looked nothing like him but looked like the pastor. He killed the baby with a straight razor. He cut his wife's throat, and then he cut his own throat. And that happened in March of 1901. Rebecca Paulson, her husband is having an affair. He is the postman, and Bobby knows that he's having an affair due to the telepathy that she has. Rebecca starts making devices just like Bobby has been making things using batteries, and she sets something up to electrocute her husband. And she feels guilty after doing it, and she grabs him and they both die via electrocution. Hillman Brown, he is one of the more interesting cases in this town. He's 10 years old. Quote, lately he felt very capable of inventing things. Lately his mind seemed almost stuffed with ideas for inventions. Page 195. He is a very gifted young boy, and he sends his mom out to get him some supplies because he has this idea for an invention to make things disappear, because he is into magic tricks. And it's interesting that Hilly's mom and his little brother, David, they leave town to run these errands, and Marie, who's been having a terrible headache in town, she feels better almost as soon as she leaves. And as soon as she comes back into town, headache returns. So Hilly has made this invention, and he's been practicing using his disappearing machine. He puts on a magic show, which is his second show, and no one is impressed. So he kind of amps it up and he says, I'm going to make things disappear now. So he goes through and he does a whole bunch of inanimate objects, and finally he says, David, little brother David, come here, I'm going to make you disappear. So David is crying, and he correctly points out that this device has not been tried on living things. So David does disappear, but he does not reappear. And I love this part. Hilly has a terrible thought about where his brother has ended up, and we kind of know that this is where David has ended up. And it's a faraway, desolate planet of some kind without proper oxygen, and it's horrifying because David is just suffering on the surface of this planet, and Hilly cannot bring his brother back. So it's the whole, it's terrifying enough to imagine it, but we are pretty sure this is where he actually is, which makes it even worse. The other interesting character is Ruth McCausland, and I always pay attention to when Stephen King has a character named Ruth, because that was his mother's middle name. And it's also interesting because David, like the young kid that disappeared, David is Stephen King's brother, his older brother. So Ruth McCausland, she is the town constable since 1974. Her husband had been a police trooper, and he died in 1972, so she is a widow, and everyone in town loves her. She is kind of the center of the community, and now that all the town is becoming connected and controlled by their hive mentality. They're all turning against her. At this point, the town is losing teeth like crazy. Women are bleeding all the time. People are vicious. People are just down to their base nature. Ruth is able to use tongue twisters in the back of her mind to stop people from prying into her thoughts. And it works for a while, but, she's kind of in a tough position. Ruth is unable to have children, and she kind of funneled that loss of having a child into collecting dolls, rare dolls, old dolls, new dolls, just tons of dolls, and they have begun talking to her. And they have written on their little chalkboard that David Brown is on Altair 4. That's what they've written. So it's pretty much confirmed now that what Hilly had envisioned is accurate. Ruth remarks that Haven has become an ant farm, or, quote, something under a bowl, page 250, which reminds me of Under the Dome. And when Ruth tries to leave town, she physically can't go too far over the town line. There's an explosion. Ruth used her dolls to blow up the town hall clock tower, and she is killed. And now outside police officers are involved, and the town has to kind of scramble to try and cover up their tracks. We find out that Hilly's grandfather has taken him into Derry because he is unwell and hysterical about, what he's done to his brother. And the grandfather stays with him. And we find out something interesting about Ev, that's his name, Everett. We call him Ev. He has 2 steel plates in his head due to a World War II injury. So he's one of the people who can't be mind read. So Ev is staying in Derry while Hilly is kind of going in and out of consciousness all the time. And, quote, sometimes he would lie in the dark and think he heard chuckling noises coming from the drains, and he would think, "You're going nuts, old-timer." Page 277. So that's obviously a reference to it. He hears about John Smith from the Dead Zone while he's at a bar in Lower Maine. He talks to David Bright, who knew/believed John Smith's story. And Ev gets a map, and he kind of plots out Haven and realizes that whatever's happening originated at Bobby's residence. He intends to go into town during Ruth's funeral, sneak in, and sabotage whatever's happening. He talks about Bobby, quote, also, she wrote good old Western stories that you could really sink your teeth into, not all full of make-believe monsters and a bunch of dirty words like the ones that fellow who lived up Bangor wrote. Page 287. That has to be Stephen King. The fellow who lived up in Bangor? I mean, it's gotta be. So the funeral happens. There's a friend of Ruth's who decides to accompany Ev. He's a trooper himself. And they get up there. They get to the spaceship. Gardner's there, and he telepathically warns Bobby and the others that some people are snooping around the place, the dig site. Bobby is shot. They take her into the shed, which is full of green light, to be healed. The cop kills himself. The excavation continues. And, Gardner pretty much works on his own, trying to excavate the rest, because everyone else is weakened by this thing, and Gardner is just unaffected because of his steel plate. The people who have been going into Bobby's shed are turning transparent. There are children who have been sent out of town on errands to purchase batteries, but they can't survive long outside of Haven. There's another reference to it. Quote, Tommy had begun to hallucinate as he drove up Wentworth Street. He thought he saw a clown grinning up at him from an open sewer manhole, a clown with shiny silver dollars for eyes and a clenched white glove filled with balloons. Page 378. Which begs the question, is there some sort of revival of Pennywise? Because they had killed it and stomped on the eggs, but I don't know, chuckling in the drain, a clown with silver eyes and balloons. I don't know. So one of the kids who went on the errand for batteries dies. That Tommy guy who's hallucinating, he dies, and then the girl is still alive. Bobby has been healed as much as she can be at this point, and she is keeping from Gardner that as soon as they get into the hatch of the spaceship, she is going to dispose of him. He is no longer of any use. And Gardner, he has discovered that Peter, the dog Peter, is in the shed. Like, he is being kept in Bobby's shed with the creepy green light coming out and people going in and out to be healed and, you know, become the stronger ones. It's a whole thing, and he is fairly convinced because Bobby is showing signs of allergies that she always had after being around Peter. So not only did Bobby lie about him being dead, but poor Peter has been in there this whole time, and who knows what has become of him. Have a spooky day.